Hey, Music Theory. So I wanted to say great job practicing your seventh chord inversions and getting a handle on that. I know it's a lot of work, and I know it's can be tiresome analyzing all of those seventh chords in isolation from one another. But I can tell you, the more you have a handle on that, the more satisfying music theory is ultimately going to be, because you begin to understand the inner workings of chord structures and how one chord follows another. So I promise you that the work that you're doing now will pay off um, as you continue down your musical journey. Okay? So here's a quick review of the seventh chord inversions. Remember that if it's in root position, right, we just call it a 7. Okay, when it goes into first inversion, where the third of the chord is the lowest note, then it's called a 6-5. Right, that's the number we use to represent that. 4-3 is the symbol used to represent the seventh chord when the fifth is the lowest note. There's the G, the fifth of the chord, C, E, G. And then finally, 4-2 is the symbol we use to represent the third inversion chord when the seventh of the chord is in the bass. There's the B flat, the dominant seventh. Okay, so there's a review of the phone number: 7-6-5-4-3-4-2. Now let's talk a little bit of theory here for a moment. And if you remember, we use this really cute snowman diagram. And you remember that when triads are in root position, right, they're the most happy and stable, as we can see from this happy snowman right here. There's the root of the chord on the bottom, the third in the middle, and then the fifth there. And here is just a C major triad. Right? If we were going to use figured bass, it would be called 5-3 in just the way that you would think, right? The root to the third is a 3, and the root to the fifth is a 5. Right? So it's just talking about the number, just like all the other inversions, from the bottom note to each of the subsequent notes as it gets stacked up. First inversion, the bottom notes move to the top, and we've got third, fifth, and root, and that's indicated by a 6. And then second inversion, you can see the snowman's about to fall over. We got his head on the bottom, the fifth, then the root, then the third. All right, and we use a 6-4 to identify that. I'm going to take you down now to a handy additional sort of evolution of the chord matrix. And I want you to start using it, because it's really going to help you understand and solve problems quickly. So you can see here is the chord matrix, but it's got some additional columns on the left. So here, let's just go from right to left. Here you can see I've indicated the position. So oftentimes you're going to be analyzing a chord and it's not going to be in root position. And so you need to, one, find out what notes are in the chord so you can figure out what Roman numeral it's going to be. But then you also need to look at the chord and see what is the bottommost note. Right? And so if, let's go back to the snowman here for a minute, and let's say that we saw a C major chord, but the E was the bottommost note of that chord. Well, if it were a triad, you could go right over here to the triad column and be reminded that the number to represent that is a 6. So in C major, this chord right here, this first inversion of one chord, would be E on the bottom, and it would be a 1-6, and that's how we would write that. If the fifth were on the bottom, it would be a 1-6-4, right, with the G on the bottom. You can use that to also figure out seventh chords as well. And so here, extending it one column further to the left, if you saw a seventh chord that was, let's go back up here, right? If you saw a seventh chord that was B, C, E, and G, well, you look at the notes in it and you see, oh, B, C, E, G, B, C, E, G, B, C, E, G. Ah, there it is. That's the one chord. And then you ask yourself, okay, what is the bottommost note? Ah, B. And then you find its place in the matrix and you go, oh, B is there. B is, oops, I misspelled that. That should read seventh right there. Darn it. Go ahead and change that on your notes. I've got this for you to print out. So when you print it out, go ahead and change that to a 7. Darn it. Okay, anyway, when B is the bottommost note, that means the 7th is on the bottom, and then it can be indicated as 4-2. So what each one of these places in its position in the chart tells you what inversion symbol you're going to use next to the Roman numeral when this particular note is in the bottom. Okay, so let's go over here and we're going to use the Miracosta alma mater to get some practice with this. So I would think that just about all of you probably have heard the alma mater. Maybe not if you're younger. An underclassman at Costa, you may not have heard it. Man, you might be a senior and never heard the alma mater. Anyway, let me play it for you on the piano. Oops. Oh, darn it. Let me do that phrase again. All right, there you go. So, good old alma mater. All right, now we're going to begin the process of some Roman numeral analysis on this. So let's see. Go ahead and have this out handy for yourself. I'm going to use the annotation tool just because I'm stuck here in the computer. And I got my text. There we go. Okay, so we're going to be first thing we need to do is say what key we're in. So we're in C major, and let me move that over here. All right, and now let's begin doing some analysis. So first thing you do, you take a note inventory. G, B, D, G. Find its place in the matrix. Ah, G, B, D, right there. That's the 5 chord. Boom. And so notice that there's no F in that chord, so it's not a 7th chord. So we don't label it as, we don't put a 7 next to it or anything, and it's in root position, so we don't put any number next to it. So we're starting off pretty easy. Look at the next one. C, G, E, C. Well, that's the 1 chord, and the root is in the bass, root is in the bottom, so we just label it as a 1. Same thing. Looks like the 5 chord again. Here we got F, C, F, and A. Looks like F, A, C. There's no 7th in that chord, and the F, the root is in the bottom, so it's just labeled as a 4. Alright, now check out this next one. We got E, C, E, and G. E, C, G. E, C, G. Ah, C, E, G right there. That's the 1 chord. Okay, label it as a 1. But E is the bottommost note. So what do I have to write next to it? E is the bottommost note. Check where it is. It's a triad. Boom. Right there. 6. Now if we were in class, you'd see that I would write this 6 as sort of a lowercase subscript 6. But I'm stuck in this annotation tool that doesn't really do that. Alright, so you just continue on. You're going to find that there's a lot of repeated chords. right? We're in C major, so there's only 7 of them in which you can use. There's the 4 chord again, right, etc. I'm going to do 2 more here. We've already done that one. That's the 5 chord. Now, check out this one. Why don't you go ahead and see if you can stop the recording and figure this one out on your own and then come back. Okay, so welcome back. And now, in taking a note inventory, I've got F, G, B, and D. F, G, B, D, F, G, B, D. There it is. G, B, D, F. That's part of the 5 chord. So I know that's the 5 chord, but what is the bottommost note? F. F is the 7th. 4-2 is my indicator, and I'm just going to write a 4-2 next to that. And that's how you continue through the whole page. Okay? Pretty self-explanatory when you use the chart. Everything is spelled out for you very nicely. So you can continue with this. I can tell you you're going to run into some issues starting down here in measure 6. Can anybody figure out what the issue is going to be? You're going to find a chord that you're not going to be able to label. Well, you may have figured it out. Chord 2 right here in measure 6 is not part of the chord matrix. It's got a G sharp in it, and G sharp's not part of this key. So that's a discussion for another day. But so you can just skip over any chord that's not in the chord matrix, okay? And that will essentially be any chord that has an accidental on it. So if you really are really enjoying the sort of thinking about music theory in this way, you can begin to think of how you might analyze those, and we'll talk about that in a future lesson. Okay, so this is pretty self-explanatory. Go ahead and finish out the alma mater, and then I wanted to extend the lesson here by showing you, talking a little bit about the stability of these chords. Okay, so take a look at the tension in these 7th chords. Right, if I go back to looking at these, the 7th chord in root position and then all of its inversions. Right, the 7th chord in and of itself is a pretty cool structure because it has dissonance in it and consonance in it at the same time. If you look at this, let's see, if I were to turn this into a major 7 chord and make it C, E, G, B, it's got a really nice sound to it, right? And if you really think about what is it that makes that so pleasing to hear, well, it's got 2 interlocking perfect fifths. All right, that's one of the most consonant, next to the octave, that's the most consonant interval that our brain likes to perceive. Bum, bum. And then look at E to B, another interlocking fifth. And then we put them together, and your brain is hearing that. But at the same time, your brain is also hearing the dissonance between the outer, the root and the 7th. And so it's sort of like this pain-pleasure sort of experience where you're hearing the consonants of the fifths and then the dissonance of the 7th. Now, when you begin to look at these chords in their inversions, that dissonance is brought out even more because there's a second. We hear the second in there, right? In the 6/5, I'll spell it up from bottom to top. Now, I'm not playing the B flat, remember, I'm just playing a major 7 chord. But you can hear that dissonance in there. And so the more you begin to invert these triad or 7th chords, right, they're just filled with tension because your brain is hearing the interval of the second in that 7th chord. So I want to just sort of show you now how these chords might be resolved. So here's the 1-6-5, right? It's in second inversion. The E is in the bottom. And in order to resolve that tension, we would need to get rid of the second, and the top note would move up. So, if you were listening to music, you might hear that chord resolve itself by the top note moving up, right? And it's resolving to a root position chord. So notice inversion to root position. Look at this one. Here's another way that this 6/5 could resolve. Instead of the top note moving up, the bottom notes could move down. Right? Again, it's resolving itself to a stable chord. Look at this chord in second inversion. The G is on the bottom. And here we're removing the dissonance in there by moving the notes down. So it's resolving itself to another root position chord. Here it is again. Here the top notes are moving up to a 5 chord. Right? And the 5 chord is just filled with tension because it's the 5 chord. But you can see at least it's in root position. And then finally, look at this most filled tension, third inversion 7th chord. That C and the B are really fighting against each other. And then it resolves down to a root position. Let me take it up the octave. Right, you can really hear it there because it's the dissonance is in the bass. Okay, so a little mini lesson on consonance and dissonance in 7th chord resolution, and I bring that up because next week we're going to begin looking at this Bach prelude. Many of you may have heard this before. Here's a little sample. Measure 8. Okay, stopping there at measure 11. But you can basically see this is essentially the same thing as the structure of the alma mater. It's in C major. We're using triads and 7th chords. But what's the difference? Well, of course, you can see it. Each one of these chords is just arpeggiated out. All right? So if you want to get a head start on this assignment, you can. You're basically looking at every chord, two chords per measure, essentially, and do a Roman numeral analysis of them. So here's C, E, G, and the C is the lowest note, so it's the 1 chord in root position. Look over here. C, D, A, D, F. So we got 4 notes here in this 2-beat chord. C, D, A, and F. That's the note inventory of this chord right here. So, can you figure out what chord that is? Where did it go? Take you back to... I think I lost it. I lost my my handout. Here it is. Oop, that's not it. It's some Elton John. That's the homework. I wonder if I closed it. Anyway, let me find it here on my desktop. Here it is. Go back to the matrix. Okay. C, D, F, and A. Well, C, D, F, A. C, D, F, A. Where is that? C, D, F, A. Ah, here it is. D, F, A, C. All right, it's the 2 chord. Then, can you figure out what inversion it's in? The C is the lowest note. D, F, A, C. Ah, okay, 2 chord, 4-2 inversion. It's in its 3rd inversion with the 7th on the bottom. So by doing this and by writing in the Roman numerals, you're going to begin to see how composers assemble chord structures that are not always in root position. That's the value of doing this. And so that's the whole point of all of the identifying of Roman numerals and inversions, because you get to learn how to put these things together in a way that is, musical, pleasing, and gives you a greater amount of expressivity as a musician and composer. Okay, so your assignment is to begin working on, or to finish working on the alma mater in the way that I showed you, and then you can get a head start on this Bach prelude.